Hello, good evening, and welcome to Business Focus, your weekly business and economic analysis program. My name is Parkwesi Asari. So, what's coming up this week? Tomorrow, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo is expected to appear before Parliament to present the State of the Nation address. This will be his first address on the state of the economy. And ahead of that presentation, there are expectations from the business community on what the president is built to be doing tomorrow in Parliament. What are your expectations? We'll be finding out what Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo is expected to say on his first State of the Nation address tomorrow. Also, government is considering extending Ghana's program with International Monetary Fund to December 2018. What is informing this decision? We'll also do some analysis on this, and then also we'll speak on the role of Savings and Loans Company in their intermediation role. This is Business Focus, your weekly business and economic analysis program. My name is Parkwesi Asari. Later on also we'll do some analysis on the stock market as well as the commodities market. Ben Ama will join us with some details on that. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll delve into our subject for the day. Hello, good evening, and welcome to Business Focus, your weekly business and economic analysis program. My name is Parkwesi Asari. So, what's coming up this week? Tomorrow, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo is expected to appear before Parliament to present the State of the Nation address. This will be his first address on the state of the economy. And ahead of that presentation, there are expectations from the business community on what the president is built to be doing tomorrow in Parliament. What are your expectations? We'll be finding out what Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo is expected to say on his first State of the Nation address tomorrow. Also, government is considering extending Ghana's program with International Monetary Fund to December 2018. What is informing this decision? We'll also do some analysis on this, and then also we'll speak on the role of Savings and Loans Company in their intermediation role. This is Business Focus, your weekly business and economic analysis program. My name is Parkwesi Asari. Later on also we'll do some analysis on the stock market as well as the commodities market. Ben Ama will join us with some details on that. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll delve into our subject. Hello, good evening, and welcome to Business Focus, your weekly business and economic analysis program. My name is Parkwesi Asari. So, what's coming up this week? Tomorrow, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo is expected to appear before Parliament to present the State of the Nation address. This will be his first address on the state of the economy. And ahead of that presentation, there are expectations from the business community on what the president. Hello, good evening, and welcome to Business Focus, your weekly business and economic analysis program. My name is Parkwesi Asari. So, what's coming up this week? Tomorrow, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo is expected to appear before Parliament to present the State of the Nation address. This will be his first address on the state of the economy. And ahead of that presentation, there are expectations from the business community on what the president is built to be doing tomorrow in Parliament. What are your expectations? We'll be finding out what Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo is expected to say on his first State of the Nation address tomorrow. Also, government is considering extending Ghana's program with International Monetary Fund to December 2018. What is informing this decision? We'll also do some analysis on this, and then also we'll speak on the role of Savings and Loans Company in their intermediation role. This is Business Focus, your weekly business and economic analysis program. My name is Parkwesi Asari. Later on also we'll do some analysis on the stock market as well as the commodities market. Ben Ama will join us with some details on that. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll delve into our subject for the day.
has inherited.
I was just about to say this, that is it going to be the usual mantra we've seen and heard over the years when new governments take over? We saw what happened in 2001, in 2009 as well. They tell you it's all doom and gloom.
Well, you know, the government has given indication already that they have inherited a difficult fiscal position, you know, that the public finances are not in good shape. And the president will reflect that in his statement. You know, it's important that one does not exaggerate, you know, the situation, given that now we have bonds trading on the international market, and if you give extreme indications about the poor state in which you are, or you exaggerate the true state of affairs, the bond markets will reflect it in your yields. Indeed, when the allegation emerged that some spending had been made but undisclosed, the bond markets reacted quite negatively. You know, our yields, which represent our cost of borrowing on the international market, immediately shot up, you know, because people were alarmed to learn about that. So important that we are moderate in the way we present the facts and focus more on the corrective measures that we have. You know, so you communicate, you know, the negative situation together with the corrective measures that you have, so that when people are making their decisions, they will temper, you know, their sentiments with the corrective.
All right. So Leslie Mensah is an economist with the Institute of Fiscal Studies. He's my guest on the show tonight. We're going to be talking about the State of the Nation address, which is happening tomorrow. That'll be the first State of the Nation address by Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. But let's listen to energy analyst Ishmael Ajekum Ehene ahead of the address tomorrow, especially on the issue of power or energy, which has been quite a topical issue over the years. Let's get to hear him.
We still do have problems with fuel supply. We still do have challenges with a situation where a little disruption in any of the links could create some shortage in the system. So in that sense, we're not out of the woods yet. But I see a major challenge going into the future, especially in terms of some of the things that this new administration said in opposition, in terms of what they intend doing with some of the levies and the price of energy. I don't see how they'll be able to bring the price down in the shortest possible time. And I'm eager to hear exactly how the president intends implementing some of the campaign promises as far as the cost of energy is concerned. The indebtedness of the public utilities in the electricity sector is close to, it's over $1.5 billion US. And as to how they're going to deal with those indebtedness, I'm not too sure they'll be able to tell us tomorrow. But what I know is that the energy sector levy that was introduced is what has been used to restructure some of the debt. And that's why I'm not too sure how this administration will be able to completely take away the energy sector levy, because there are some commitments that have been made with the previous administration in terms of how they're going to use that energy sector levy to deal with some of the debt of ECG and also VRA.
All right, so Ishmael Ajekum Ehene is Executive Director of KITE, giving us an idea of what the energy situation looks like and his expectation ahead of tomorrow's State of the Nation address by President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. I've also been joined in the studio by Benjamin Amoah-Adjei. He is an economist with First Bank Financial Services. Ben, thank you very much for your time. How different is this State of the Nation address going to be from the budget presentation?
This one is supposed to paint a picture of how it has been before the government took over, or at least that's what they are going to try to do, which means that we can expect it to point out all the challenges that they have inherited from the previous government. But again, we would also want it to set the pace for the budget going forward. We can't expect a lot of figures and facts in this State of Nations address, but at least we expect the president to be able to address some of the issues that are pressing at the moment, or at least give clarity going forward before the budget itself is ready in March.
For you as an economist, what issues do you consider pressing?
I think the power sector is very key at this very moment. We need to know how the government intends to deal, especially with the energy sector debts, which have still not been completely dealt with, even though we know that some of the debt that was owed to the banks by VRA there is a deal between the Bank of Ghana and the Mutual Finance where they are trying to solve that. But there are still other debts that are outstanding, especially the ones that are supposed to cater for the BDCs. And we still don't have any clarity on that going forward. They were in talks before the elections. It looks like that has been put on hold for now. We would want to know what the government is going to do about that, because that can influence the happening or an outcome where there's doomsday once again in this country, especially if they can't pay for the gas that we are getting from Nigeria. And so we need to know how they are going to deal with those debts, especially.
Leslie, for you, what issues do you consider pressing?
Well, first of all, the public finances are in a bad position. Indeed, we have been on an unsustainable path of debt accumulation. I expect the president to highlight this problem, but then to give an outline or a framework, not details, of how he will tackle this problem, how he will restore the public finances to a sustainable position. We also have the problem of macroeconomic instability. Again, I expect the president to put forward an outline of how he will manage this economy.
Macroeconomic instability, what are you talking about? I mean, we've seen inflation go down over the past few months. We've seen the policy rates also go down, where this exchange rate, for instance, it's not really been that bad, has it?
Well, the exchange rate, started showing volatility towards the end of 2016. And people obsess over the decline in inflation to end year 15.4%. But the average for 2016, and the average reflects people's actual experience with prices, was 17.1% higher than in 2015. The average over the 12-month period. And that's still very high inflation, because inflation at an average of 17.1% means that for you to be better off in real terms, your income should be growing by at least 17.1%. That's too high. Again, the growth of the economy has shrunk, from an average of 7 to 8% over a decade to 2013 to under 4% at present. There are issues with the fiscal position, the deficit, the public debt. All of these count in the assessment of the stability of the economy.
Haven't you seen the debt to GDP ratio come down, as we've been told by the outgone finance minister, Sethekwe, although we're still a highly debt-distressed economy?
Did he ever say that?
Yes, I thought he said the debt to GDP ratio had come down from about 67 also to 63%.
No, he put out that figure in May, but at the IFS we did warn that always happens mid-year, because you calculate the debt to GDP ratio using a projected GDP for the end of the year. But as we speak, the debt has gone up to 74% of GDP from 72% of GDP at the end of 2015. In fact, post-HIPC, the debt burden of Ghana has never fallen in any year. We have continually been accumulating debt.
Ben?
It's a problem. It comes down to fiscal discipline. Government should be able to check its spending. It's unfortunate that we've seen this 4-year cycle where every election year there's a free fall in the government's own self-imposed fiscal discipline measures. Now, this year was supposed to be different because
we're under an IMF program. We were made to believe we're under an IMF program.
And that would have made all the difference. I mean, even if the government itself was not going to check its own spending, somebody with a cane was supposed to do that for us. Unfortunately, the IMF is saying that the budget, the deficit is close to 9.5%, which is almost...
That's way above the, I think, about 5% target.
5.25% target. That's almost double. And it's sad because then it means that we haven't really broken out of that election year fiscal indiscipline cycle.
So where was the expenditure? Was it in infrastructure? Was it just money being doled out to people?
Well, the problem came from 2 points. Revenue was lower than expected because of problems with oil production. Now, the appropriate thing is that you would think if revenue was lower, expenditure should have also fallen in line with that. But expenditure was actually a little higher than budgeted for, even though the revenues were lower. So obviously there was a shortfall in there, and that's what led to the very high amount we are seeing.
You know, guys, people are looking at all this and are beginning to suggest that it's going to be extremely difficult for this Nana Akufo-Addo government to live up to some of its promises, like reducing taxes, for instance. Frankly, do you foresee that happening?
In fact, it's one of the things I expect the president to address in their address, in their State of the Nation's address tomorrow. The issue is they campaigned heavily on the premise of lowering taxes and eliminating some of them altogether, including the financial services tax and the 5% tax on real estate. Now, if the fiscal deficit is as bad in 2016 as they say it is, then they would have to actually consolidate, which means finding ways to raise more revenue. I don't know.
Of course,
they're
talking about expanding the tax net and involving a lot more people, but is that not going to be a long-term solution to addressing a challenge within a short term?
It will be, which means that in the very interim, I am sincerely a little unsure of which taxes they intend to cut and the effect it would have on the fiscal balance.
I mean, they call these nuisance taxes.
Nuisance taxes. There are quite a number of them. So, in fact, we are all waiting patiently for the budget reading on March 3rd, because that will give us clarity going forward. An example is the fiscal stabilization levy. Former Finance Minister Setekpe said in the 2016 budget at the time that they were going to cut it. They were going to eliminate that tax. We ended the year and the tax was still there, which means we can't be very sure about how this new government is going to treat it. It's one of the nuisance taxes.
Leslie, what's your own prognosis on this issue about taxes and what the government promised during the campaign period and what the reality seems like, and how's it going to pan out for the economy, really?
Well, my own prognosis is that they will try to deliver on some of the tax cuts promised. Obviously, the situation they have inherited is less than desirable and is going to limit their options. So I do not anticipate that they will implement all the tax cuts they have
But
promised.
of course, they had always said on the campaign trail that the economy was being mismanaged and things were bad and terrible. And so,
I look at their promises in the context of a 4-year mandate, and they did not say anywhere that we will do all that we have promised in year one. You see,
right.
And particularly when the finances are not as good as they would have preferred it to be, they can do some and do the others in years 2, 3, and 4. But what is fact is that their options are going to be severely limited by the financial.
They do not have enough room to maneuver, like you said during your pre-budget forum about the need to pay statutory funds and all that, and leaving very little room for maneuvers. But I'm pretty much also interested in the latest debate on the free school, free senior high school, and the way to fund it. I've had a lot of people, for instance, civil society groups, question the government and actually expect the president to talk about it tomorrow on how they intend to fund it. The issue of the Heritage Fund came up, and there's been a lot of hue and cry about it. What's your take on that?
The finance minister has come out to say they're not going to touch the Heritage Fund for the free SHS, which means that they haven't yet told us how they are going to fund it. But it's going to be extraordinarily expensive for them to do it, especially in the initial year. And we expect that they have to give some clarity going forward. They have stated they want to start it in 2017. There's not enough. I honestly struggle to see how they're going to raise money to do that. Unless they are very confident about tax revenues over the next 6 months, I sincerely don't know how they are going to raise money for that. Again, another option could be that we are expecting significant gas revenue from gas production and oil production, especially if the Sankofa Dynamic fields come online later this year. And so maybe the government is banking on that as a source of revenue in order to fund the free SHS.
Great. I'm going to hold you on that. Let's go and listen to the civil society group ISODEC. Steve Montia, he's executive director of ISODEC. He's been commenting on the Heritage Fund and some of the issues that have come up lately.
I believe they will border on the macroeconomic indicators. Are some things that have been put out already by the statistical services, and therefore things that we know about. I guess he'll focus a bit more on the GDP growth rate, inflation, interest rates, and stuff like that. It would be good, again, to outline these because they establish the baseline, the economic baseline from where the new government inherited, and therefore serving as the benchmark from which we measure performance over the next few years. Again, I would expect that the issue about financing of the free SHS will be a major issue on the agenda. I would expect some more details to be provided, given the controversy, the recent indication that we may be resorting to the Heritage Fund. But given that the announcement by the senior minister has generated some controversy, of course we know the government has retracted on that, and so the issue is no more like we're going to fall on the Heritage Fund. But then again, people are actually anxious to know where the funding sources will come from. And I would expect that some indication, some hazy indications will be given in terms of where we can expect to find money to sustain the free SHS. Given that, again, the president at Okwapman Secondary School actually announced that they are taking off in September, I'm pretty sure he's going to retrade that. And as he retrades that, he will take the opportunity to outline the potential funding sources. My biggest expectation will be how we are going to deal with the issue of the tax reliefs that we intend to, our government intends to grant the private sector, particularly how we are going to make up for the shortfall that may arise as a result of these elaborate tax reliefs that have been pledged. Again, I would like to see what strategies the government may have in place for addressing some of the leakages in our tax administration system, particularly issues about transfer mispricing, non-payment of capital gain tax, especially in the natural resource sector, and other ways in which companies and individuals avoid the payment of taxes in this country.
All right. Thank you. All right, so those are Dr. Steve Mantiao. He's the Executive Director of ISODEC, also talking about expectations ahead of tomorrow's State of the Nation address by President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. Ben, you can wrap up on that, and I'll come to Leslie, and then we'll talk about the plans by government to extend the IMF program to December 2018.
Okay, so we would also want to hear about exactly which kind of taxes that the government intends to cut in the address tomorrow. We would want to know how they intend to broaden the tax net. Even if we don't have the minute details, we'd like to know how the government intends to implement that, because it has been a running issue over the last 2 decades in this country. Again, like I said before, energy sector debts, we would want to know how they intend to deal with that, and also how to address power challenges, although I believe that is almost, it's an issue that we have almost dealt with quite well. So,
Leslie, funding of free SHS and...
Well, you know, the implication of free SHS and other grandiose plans of the government is that there'll be more spending. For the government to spend any amount of money, it needs to transfer resources from the private sector to the public sector through mobilizing more revenue. The other alternative is to borrow. So I will be better prepared to assess free SHS when I have seen the comprehensive package of policies from this government to jumpstart the growth of the economy, to improve revenue mobilization, to tackle the inefficiencies in various expenditure areas in order to generate savings to partly pay for spending in areas where they want to increase spending. I think it would make, it will be easier to analyze a policy when you have seen the totality of where they want to take this economy in the next 4 years.
I see. Okay, so let's talk about the IMF program. Now, government is considering extending Ghana's program with the International Monetary Fund to December 2018. The Minister of Monitoring and Evaluation, Dr. Anthony Akutosei, says even though the extension has not been finalized by both parties, discussions are underway on the matter, which featured heavily on the agenda during a visit by the International Monetary Fund assessment team to Ghana last week. Now, Ghana entered into a 3-year program with the International Monetary Fund on April 2015 for a total amount of $918 million, which was expected to be disbursed in 8 equal tranches. Leslie, I'll start off with you. Why the need to renegotiate this?
Well, you know, first of all, the indication that the program period will be extended does not astonish me, because you see, the program's timetable was not being followed, and particularly during the third review. You know, the third review was prolonged because the fund wanted certain prior conditions to be satisfied before they gave the approval. And because the third review was delayed, it affected the fourth review. In fact, the fourth review should have been completed in November last year, but the fund team did not even come to Ghana to conduct the review. So that will then affect the 5th and the 6th and the 7th reviews. Meanwhile, to access the funding under the program, the various reviews must be completed and the conditions agreed with the fund must be met. So to allow time for all these things to be done, obviously you need to extend the program period, you know. So irrespective of the outcome of the election, you know, the extension would have happened.
Right.
Okay. Talk of renegotiation, I think...
Hold on there. We'll go on a short break. When we return, we'll find out the implications of the possible extension of the IMF program. You're watching Business Focus, your weekly business and economic analysis program. We're talking about the plans by government to extend the IMF program. My guest in the studio, Leslie Mensah, is an economist with the Institute of Fiscal Studies, and Benjamin Amoeje is also an economist with First Bank Financial Services. We're back shortly. You're welcome back to Business Focus, your weekly business and economic analysis program. If you just joined us, we're talking about the State of the Nation address, which is to be presented by President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. We've just talked about that. That's going to be the first State of the Nation address by Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. We're dovetailing into our very next subject, which has to do with government's plans to possibly extend the program with the International Monetary Fund to December 2018. And Leslie, you were just telling me about the implications of this extension, but you're not surprised at all, are you?
Yes, I'm not. As I said, it is to accommodate the work required to be done under the program, because review deadlines have been missed. You know, reviews have been postponed. So you need more time to complete all the reviews that have been scheduled and to receive all the funds, you know, contracted for under the program. Renegotiation review, I think too much fuss has been made about renegotiating, reviewing the program. The IMF program has regular reviews, and the reviews are intended to respond to actual outcomes, because the program begins with estimates of where they want to go, what is likely to happen. So once they have actual numbers, they have to review the data and the projections that they have made. Again, they want to respond to changing conditions, because sometimes you make projections based on certain conditions which change in future. So there are regular reviews under the program, and whatever review is going to happen now will be one of those. Now, what's the situation we have now? The IMF had anticipated that if Ghana brought down its budget deficit to 5% thereabout in 2016, then it would aim to bring it further down to 3.5% in 2017. Now that we're being told that there was a deviation, obviously that path of deficit
has been truncated.
It's no longer tenable. You need to craft a new path of fiscal consolidation. Again, this is a government that has come into power with its own policies and programs. And just as the previous government reflected its own policies and programs and reform measures in the IMF program, this government will want to reflect its own policies and programs in the IMF arrangement. So they have talked about, in terms of the structural fiscal reforms, creating a fiscal council, enacting a Fiscal Responsibility Act. They may have their own ideas about how to deal with the indebtedness of the SOEs. All of these will have to be reflected in the IMF program. You know, and that's why the review needs to
but Ben, I mean, he talks about fiscal council. I mean, all well and nice, but this appear to be theories. I mean, how are these going to be practicalized?
I think that's the point of the extension. Like you said, it's a new government. They have their own ways of doing things. Now, the IMF is always trying to make it look as if they're not the ones who are imposing on the countries that come to them. So
they're talking about homegrown solutions, homegrown policies.
So we have a new government. What's the new government saying? And how can we fix all of that into the bailout program? Again, we have had a very significant shortfall from where we should have been by now, which means that we will need more time in order to fall back within range. And then that would imply that we would have to extend the bailout for a while. The issue is also that there's a little bit of uncertainty going forward, because these are new individuals that the IMF is going to be working with. So they would like to, you know, start, it's like the beginning of a new relationship altogether. And so they will need more time in order to be able to put into effect everything that they have planned in the past. So I think that's what is driving this extension. Some of the things that they are going to be doing are not going to be so different from what they were last year or last 2 years, obviously. But then there are also situations like the one district, one factory. There is something like the free SHS, all of which will require significant expenditures. And the IMF will have to know how that will fit into its whole idea of fiscal consolidation over the next 2 years.
Listen, so, I mean, how are Ghanaians expected to take all this, really?
Well, as I said earlier, the public finances are in a poor position, and to bring this down to the level of non-experts, we've piled on so much debt and run the risk of having to spend all of our revenues to service debt. And once you get into that position, you spend less on the essential public services that your population needs. You spend less on public investments. That's why it's important to maintain a sustainable debt position. So doing that will help the economy in the long run. Again, we need to jumpstart economic growth. Economic growth is a reflection of sales, of economic activity, of production going on in the economy. And that the growth of that has been shrinking for the last 3-4 years. We need to jumpstart that, take it back to the higher levels that we had previously. We need to tackle the problem of employment creation in this economy. And at the IFS, we have said that there should be a shift of focus to agriculture manufacturing, which hold greater potential to create more jobs than services. Most of the low-value services we have been doing. So the success of this program, which will improve the fiscal position and the state.
So what you're saying is that Ghanaians would have to be patient with its government?
Well, I think they have a right to ask that the electoral pledges made to them be redeemed in the period of this government, And it's up to the government to do what it can, and in situations where it cannot immediately redeem some of those pledges, explain to the population what the problems are and what is the timeline to realistically achieve all that they have promised.
Leslie, Ben?
I think the problem now is for the government to be able to prioritize. It has become rather obvious they can't do everything that they said they were going to do based on the current economic situation and the fiscal position we find ourselves in. So I think the government will have to prioritize. Obviously, in that effort to prioritize, we would have some of them making economic sense and some of them making political sense. We would want to know how the government balances those two and, maneuvers its way around over the next 4 years, at least up until the next election, so they can say, at least we said this and this and that. We didn't do all of it, but we've done this and this. And that's going to be the main challenge of the government.
So how does government expect to communicate this to the populace, like Leslie saying? Is there room for propaganda, or they just have to be as blunt as possible?
I am not sure we'd want to call it propaganda. I think we would have to call it saying the truth to Ghanaians. Which is why I expect that in tomorrow's address, for instance, they'll make it rather clear the situation they've inherited from the previous government. It is not really propaganda. It's just telling the people the truth that we expected things to be like this. It's not really like this. So maybe we can't do A and B, but we can manage C and D.
Is there a better way of communicating this to Ghanaians, the true state of the economy, and the fact that, listen, our hands are tied at this moment, we cannot do as we promised?
Well, there are ways to get around the problems that we have. This government campaigned on the belief that they had superior economic solutions for this country. Now is the time to enact those superior solutions. And there are ways to get around some of the problems. We have talked about, at the IFS, the rigidity in the budget. And we have said that one way to tackle the rigidity, the fact that it's so difficult for the Ministry of Finance to find fiscal space to spend, one way to tackle this is to use the budget as a springboard to reform all the earmarking arrangements that we have, DACF, GET Fund and all of that. To reform that, better align them with the budget. If you need to impose caps and caps on some of these transfers, do that to create the space to spend in some of the essential areas that you have planned to spend money. There are obviously better ways to manage the public debt. Okay. Again, if you manage to excite greater confidence in your policies, that can help with stabilizing the macroeconomy. So their options are limited, but they are not in a situation where they have to tell us that, look, we can do so little because we inherited a budget. They did make us believe that they had superior solutions. Now is the time to reflect those superior solutions in the management of the economy.
The contribution of, we've talked about revenue generation, how limited it is. The contribution of oil to to Ghana's total GDP is so little. I mean, when you compare to let's say gold, for instance. Tell me, how is crude oil faring now on the world market?
Crude oil is currently trading within a very tight band. It looks like whenever it's about to pick up a little, people start producing, so the price comes down again. It's trading between $55 and $58. I mean, over the last few weeks, that's been within that range. And it looks like it's going to be stable around that level for a long time now. The first report about the OPEC deal has come out. It appears they are actually sticking to the deal. They're actually cutting production as they planned. Some of them have actually even done more than they were supposed to do,
wow.
which is quite impressive for a cartel, especially in today's modern age. The
So
problem
this is expected to what? Cause prices to go up?
it's expected to. But the problem is OPEC doesn't control the market share it used to in the past. It used to have like 70% of the market share. Currently it's below 45%. The US and Canada and even Ghana are not OPEC members and they're all producing. So the problem is, even though they have cut production, there's still a very huge supply glut sitting somewhere.
Because there's still a lot of shale oil production in the United States.
Going on, there's production going on in the oil sands in Canada, there's production going on in the seas in Norway and in the UK, and even in Ghana, we are still expected to boost production this year when the Sankofa Jiname fields come online. So there's a problem there.
Yeah, the lesson from the crude oil price decline and the impact on our economy is that going forward we need to manage the fiscal risks that we confront more proactively. We cannot complain ad infinitum about commodity shocks, derailing the progress of this economy. So you need in the short term an insurance mechanism to manage the volatility. Over the medium to long term, think of ways to diversify the economy, the export base of
more value addition.
That's right. And to reduce the dependence on these commodities, which leave us dancing to the rhythm of the international commodity market. That's the lesson. We should not wait till after the event, after the shock, to take a supplementary budget to revise estimates, when there are ways in which we can manage the volatility ex ante. That's the lesson.
Right. Quickly, we've got to wrap up, but Ben, quickly, tell me about the price of cocoa, how it's faring, and then also the cocoa and gold as well, yeah.
Cocoa is still doing rather poorly. It's around $2,000 now, which is rather low as compared to how it did last year and the previous year as well. So that's a risk for Ghana now. There's another commodity risk that we are facing. If cocoa prices stay this low, it means that our revenue targets might be at risk again for this year, especially from export revenues. Gold prices are picking up a little because of this ongoing political uncertainty in Europe and the US. Europe has quite a number of elections this year, and nobody knows how they are going to turn out. So gold is seeing some interest from investors, and that is also helping gold price pick up, which is good for us. But like he said, we can't expect commodity prices and the movements in those prices to be influencing our economy the way they do now. We have to deal with it.
Quickly, find out something about the stock market as well. What's happening on the stock market?
Stock market is up again. It looks like we are on a very bullish run. And I think it's being supported by some of the very strong financial reports we are receiving from some of the companies. We are yet to receive reports from the banks, though. We will get those next week, and so we are waiting to see what happens, and that should drive the market forward.
I've got to say a big thank you to you, gentlemen. Leslie Mensah is an economist with the Institute of Fiscal Studies. Benjamin Amoah, also an economist with First Bank Financial Services. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time and in helping me do this analysis. We'll take a short break. When we return, my guest is Kweku Dua-Berchi. He's a financial analyst, also a member of GALSAC. We're talking about the contribution of savings and loans companies to Ghana's economy. Don't go nowhere. Stay tuned. All right, you're welcome back to Business Focus, your weekly business and economic analysis program. Now, the small and medium scale sector provides jobs for countless number of youth, and if well developed, the sector will open up employment market and provide for livelihoods. Now, the formal banking sector has for many years not been able to provide the needed access to finance for many small scale businesses due to its high risk. Now, this situation has created space for savings and loans companies to become the main providers of capital for these companies. Savings and loans companies ensure the sustainability and growth of those companies and their customers for the ultimate development of the national economy. My guest tonight on the program is Kweku Dua-Berchi. He's a financial analyst and also a member of GALSAC. He'll help me do some analysis and discussion on savings and loans companies. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. Good to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So there's this huge perception out there that there's a lot of problem with savings and loans companies. How do we, you know, change this perception?
Well, the perception came as a result of, you know, Ghana has a unique situation. You go elsewhere, when they mention microfinance, you know the sector. But Ghana is a broad spectrum. You have the Susu people all the way up to some commercial banks offering the microfinance products. So savings and loans also fall within the same range. So that perception has been there for quite a while, and it's within that issue that the Bank of Ghana came up with a guideline, the operating guidelines and rules for microfinance institutions in Ghana in 2011. So that one kind of segregated the various players. So you take the rural banks, the savings and loans companies, and the finance houses are supposed to be tier 1. That's within that category. Then you take the next one is the SUSU, who are now the Ghana Association of Microfinance Companies, the GAMC. They are in the tier 2. And then you have those who are not supposed to take deposits, falling within the tier 3 and the tier 4. And these are your money lenders and then the cooperatives and the rest. So the tiers 1 and 2 are supposed to take deposit. They are mandated by the Bank of Ghana to do that. So that is the thing. But when anything happens, it falls under the remit of microfinance institutions.
And that's the major challenge.
Yes.
The major challenge is distinguishing between microfinance companies and savings and loans companies.
Yes.
How do we do that?
Well, we organized, we got an advocacy fund that we conducted a research in order for us to actually understand the perception. Because, as you know, somebody's perception should be your reality. And we came up with 3 core issues that needs to be addressed, especially after the DKM debacle that affected a lot of savings and loans companies. In fact, some people even trooped in to actually do massive withdrawals. It was later on that they realized that there is a distinction between the savings and loans companies and the microfinance institutions. Sometimes they also call us banks, which is an advantage to some extent. And we came to the realization that we have to, the Ghana Association of Savings and Loans Companies, we have to do 3 core issues. There's one that is specific with the Bank of Ghana. The Bank of Ghana, when they hear that somebody is operating an unlicensed business, financial sector, they should close them down and prosecute them. The second one is with the association itself. Currently, there are 32 savings and loans companies that have been registered and licensed by the Bank of Ghana. So we also must serve as a watchdog, where if you see in the community in which you operate, if you come across any unlicensed financial institution, you just report them to the authorities for them to either close them down or prosecute them. Because
And how did you bank this in the minds of the investing public?
what we are doing now is for us to ensure that we do a lot of education. So the GASALC is doing that through a collaboration with GIZ and then the BUSAC Fund and the rest. So individual companies also have started doing these SME retreats and trainings and so on and so forth for the customers and the general public. So that is what we are doing now. And the other factor is for us to be bonded together, even though we are competitors, we float or sink together. So we've also come to the realization that we have to organize a lot of training sessions and then just go out there and do some of these corporate social responsibilities and just sell our products. So that is what we are on now.
I know you breached the gap between the formal banking sector,
Yes.
you know, but how are you ensuring a lot more financial intermediation between the public?
And we are doing that with our products and services. For instance, most of us are using the POS, and some of us also have the digital financial, age, where we are deploying things like the mobile money and using the mobile phone to actually do mobile banking. Pan-African Savings and Loans, for instance, is doing that. So we are doing the best, because what we have come to realize is that in the perception of most of the populace, is the banks and the microfinance. There is no middle, but we are supposed to serve as the middle, and we are serving. So we are trying to debunk that idea of the missing middle to the people.
Generally, it's assumed that SMEs are still small in terms of business profile. I mean, how can you encourage a lot more in terms of employment, for instance?
Okay, for most countries, the SME sector employs more people than even the big guys. And I think in Ghana, if we actually formalize everything and count well, they still have the numbers. So the best way is, one thing I have realized, at least from my personal experience with those that we finance, is they don't have the capacity or the ability to train their staff. They recruit them all right, but the retention is a problem for them. That is one aspect. And then even some of them, little things like bookkeeping, managing the business well. So we have started, my Pan-African Savings and Loans has started doing that project, where every 6 months we meet them, and then we show them basic things and things that they have to look at within their companies. Because most of these SMEs, what they usually do is to hire 3 or 4 people, 5 people, and it will shock you to know that some of them don't even know how their inventory is, the stock level and the rest. They just go to China or wherever it is. They just bring in the stuff, put it in there, and they sell. That's all there is to it. So our interaction with them, I think we, the financial institutions, have to interact with them more so that we can hear them and actually bridge a gap to serve their needs. Because when they float, we float. Because their survival is dependent on us, and we also depend on them. So I think that is what we have to look at. And then the country as a whole, we must have a policy to actually support these SMEs. Because before any big company became big, they probably started off as an SME, and they formed the majority. So I think that is where we have to concentrate and look at.
Generally, you look at the business climate, is it one that is encouraging for the growth of SMEs?
Currently, I think there is a feel that things might get better. So I believe that it's a good climate now, and most of the institutions are also willing to lend. So they should come in and bank.
Nana Kudri Abechi, financial analyst, we're also a member of GALSA. Thank you very much for your time this evening. That's how we wrap up here on Business Focus. Thanks for watching. We'll see you same time next week. And next week we have Time with the Captains live on TV3. Make a date with us on Time with the Captains. Thank you very much for watching.